Welcome to episode 3 of That's What They All Say, Conversations Across Generations.
So in the last episode, we had kind of gone through my early childhood all the way up through college. And so I thought it might be good. We'll pick up there kind of where we left off. So my senior year, I chose Fort Hood, Texas as my first duty assignment. And so that's kind of where the story sort of begins.
Was Fort Hood your first choice?
So actually, no. So I had wanted to go to Germany. And so the intent was we'd done a little bit of a straw poll. And so I think I mentioned last time I was sort of middle of the road, average cadet, number 77 in the branch. And so I wasn't super high, but it figured out that if everybody chose like they were supposed to, I should just slide into getting Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was number, I think, 77 on the list. And I just remember that, as the way it worked was you stood up and you picked your branch and they just, or picked your post, and they marked off. So at Fort Hood had 20 slots. Someone says, I want to go to Fort Hood, that now Fort Hood has 19 slots. Okay. And so, you had like Hawaii and Panama and Europe and all these places everybody wanted to go. And so I'm sitting there watching and they're dwindling and dwindling and dwindling down. And it turns out that, for some reason, there was kind of a pause at like number 73, 74. So there's only about 3 people in front of me. Mm-hmm. And there were 3 slots left to Germany. So I was actually kind of confident. I thought, okay, as long as one of these guys doesn't take Germany, I'm good. So next guy, Germany. Next guy, Germany. Third guy, Germany.
Oh, no.
And so literally the guy in front of me took the very last slot to Germany.
Did you look at him and be like, death stare?
No, I was sitting next to him and I just sort of thought, And so I stood up because you didn't have much time to react. Mm-hmm. And I had 2 options. I had a whole list and I'd been marking them off and Germany was off. So now I had 2 options, Fort Bragg, Fort Hood. And I really thought at the time, I'm not going to like the Army. I'm really not. I kind of feel like I'm going to do 5 and fly. And so I thought if it's going to suck, I'd rather drive around in a vehicle at Fort Hood because they're mechanized units there versus Fort Bragg, light infantry, everybody's walking everywhere. At least that was my mindset. And so that was how I ended up with Fort Hood. Not my first choice, not really the place I was really excited about going, but that was sort of the place that I will say in hindsight, that's the place that God was sending me to. So
I think we'll get into that more.
Yeah.
Right?
So once I got to Fort Hood, after the basic course at Fort Leonard Wood, a couple of months of training, I got to Fort Hood. And what really actually happened was I really loved the Army. I really enjoyed the mission, the camaraderie, and I would say even like a sense of purpose, kind of being part of something larger than yourself. And I really enjoyed my time being a platoon leader. Ultimately, I became a company XO before I left as well.
Oh, wow. Do you think that looking back at the time when you developed this love for the military and for leadership, do you think that was kind of like planting seeds or maybe God planting seeds for your desire to eventually become a leadership coach, which you now are?
Yeah, I think that, I asked somebody, my coach this one time, I said, do you think that the Army kind of developed in me, these traits, or do you think I kind of had these to beginning with? And his answer was, you probably had these traits, and then I really resonated. The military just gave me lots and lots of reps to do more and more leadership. And so because it was something I already kind of wanted to do, I feel like the military just really gave me lots and lots of practice, gave me the ability to do it over and over. And I got a lot of feedback on it too, both positive and negative, things I was doing well, things I wasn't doing well. And it wasn't just the military that was sort of a big spark in my life. It was there through an organization called the Navigators, who I'd been involved with at West Point through doing Bible studies. It was there that I really experienced that one-on-one discipleship. I mentioned in the last episode, 2 Timothy 2:2, and it really became a life verse. The things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will be able to teach others also. And just that idea that, just going to church, just doing a Bible study was not significant enough. I felt like there was kind of more that we were called to do, but I never felt like I could be a preacher or a pastor or even a chaplain. I just didn't feel like that was kind of really necessarily in what I wanted to do or what I felt called to do. But I felt like one-on-one, I can sit down and mentor. I can sit down and disciple someone. And so as someone was discipling me, I in turn started discipling others. And I feel like that really was another component for sort of what I loved about the military was, I mean, there's lots of people that are really hungry. I think they're looking for answers. In many cases, young soldiers, it's kind of their first time away from their family, away from making all their own adult decisions. It's very much like college age students, but not without the college. It's in the military. And I really enjoy that type of ministry. So I felt like that was another thing that happened at Fort Hood that I really resonated with.
Hmm. You mentioned with like the navigators that it depicted a really good picture of what discipleship looks like. So, based off of your experience, what do you think true discipleship looks like and what it actually doesn't look like?
So I think the second question is a little easier to explain
Okay.
what it doesn't look like. It's not a program. It's not a set of check the blocks and do all these things.
Mhm.
It's not something where it's not a destination that you arrive at. It's more of a lifelong process. And so
Okay.
I look at discipleship as just sort of walking through life with people and helping others. And so I feel like you should always have a couple of relationships in your life. Number one, you should always have a Paul in your life, someone who is your mentor, who's
Hmm.
mentoring you. My first real experience of having someone really directly do that was at Fort Hood. I feel like you should also have lots of peers, Barnabas type relationships, people that they're sort of at your same level and you're just kind of doing life together and you're encouraging each other and you're helping each other. And then I feel like at some point, it's not always there. And sometimes it takes a little while to kind of before you're ready, but there should be at some point a Timothy relationship, someone who kind of looks up to you for spiritual mentorship and guidance. And it's not that you've arrived, it's that you're a little farther along in your walk than they are. And so I feel like discipleship is kind of an intense one-on-one relationship. It's choosing someone that you're going to follow and choosing someone that you're going to then help, that Paul relationship as well as the Timothy relationship, someone that you can help in their walk with God, and just really do life with them, as because a lot of times we did different things, we did different types of Bible studies, but sometimes someone shows up and says, hey, I'm having a rough time with
Mhm.
my girlfriend or my wife or whatever it may be, and it's like, okay, well, let's deal with that. Let's
Yeah.
look at the Bible, let's pray, let's kind of focus on that. So it's really kind of doing life on life and just helping them through life as a mentor and as someone you can really help them
Yeah.
with.
That's awesome. So you said a couple of things shaped you at Fort Hood. Um, you developed your love of the military and the mission, the camaraderie, um, all of that. And then you also learned and got involved with the navigators, which really shaped you spiritually. Was there anything else that developed your character or that came maybe unexpected?
Yes, actually, that was at Fort Hood at a Bible study. That was where I met my wife, your mom, Carla Coleman. So it was quite unexpected because in my mind, I kind of had a timeline. I figured I need to know someone for a certain amount of time. And then kind of that time had come and passed, and I was looking forward to kind of my next assignment.
Hmm.
And so I really wasn't looking to get into a relationship, but one thing led to another, and before you know it, Carla and I were courting, and then we were engaged, and then we got married, and then we left about 4 months later after that. So yeah, so thank goodness I didn't go to Germany because
Right.
not quite sure if that would have delayed things or if mom would have been in Germany somehow. But it's a
That would have
long
been
series of
crazy.
events that got her to Fort Hood. I don't think she had it on her radar screen that I'm going to go to a Bible study and meet my future husband. But
Yeah.
we've now been married for 28 years and still going. So yeah, so something that definitely shaped me, molded me, and changed really the rest of my life as well. So something else good that came from my time at Fort Hood. This was also the kind of the first time that I really started thinking about getting out of the military because I had thought maybe five and fly, maybe I'll get out.
Mm.
But my mentor, or just and the guy that discipled me at Fort Hood, one of the things he suggested is he said, hey, if you're not sure about whether or not you want to get out or stay in or whatever, take that next assignment, see how that goes, see if you really want to leave or if it's just maybe you're tired of Fort Hood and the things that are going on there. And he also said, you'll never get better leadership training than being in the Army. And so the next level was really company command. That's usually about 120 to 150 person command. And I looked up, 95% of the companies in the United States have less than 120 employees.
Oh, wow.
So after only 4 or 5 years out of college, I will have been way ahead of any peer I will have tons of leadership experience.
Hmm.
And so I kind of felt like that's a great next step to take. And really just decided that, well, I still actually owed another year to West Point. So the way West Point kind of times it out, it's time to move before you're fully done. Each time you move, you add a year. You go to this course, it adds another year. And so the Army kind of just sort of dangles these things out in front of
Yeah.
you. And so it's like, oh, take the next move. Okay, that's another year you owe. And before you know it, like you can end up like being in the Army for 8, 9, 10 years or whatever. And so I still owed some time, felt like
Okay.
I want to honor my commitment to go
Mhm.
the full 6 years that I owed, and I also really wanted to kind of see what life would be like as a company commander, and really as kind of being on the front line. I mean, oftentimes people say it's the hardest job in the military, and I would agree in many ways. Leadership wise, it is one of the most difficult ones because you're really hands on, and
Mm.
there's a lot of stuff that you have to do.
So where did you move next?
So after that, we went to Fort Leonard Wood for 6 months for some training, and
Okay.
then we moved to Korea. And again, not my first choice, not quite
Hmm.
really what I wanted to do, but that was the job. And it turned out that it was kind of an accelerator because I was able to basically walk into command. I had spent about 1 month kind of getting ready, another month doing inventories and everything, and then moved right into company command. So right out of the
Wow.
gate, I was again kind of ahead of my peers because I was given the opportunity to command. And the company that I took over, I was sort of told later there were some serious questions about whether that company was really well trained and kind of how the previous
Really
leadership had done.
interesting.
They had some issues, and I kind of told that I'd made a big difference in terms of really focusing them on their wartime mission and really kind of upping the level of training.
What specifically about that training made a difference, and how did you see from your perspective, and then from those hired from you, how that changed your company?
Mm. So one of the things that I felt like Fort Hood did a great job of is really letting me see what right looked like in terms of training. And I kind of got some insight from the chaplain and from other, leadership, kind of what the unit was like. And the unit had not they didn't have high standards when it came to PT. They didn't do a lot of planning for training because, the company commander had this idea, well, they're going to change my training anyway, so why bother to plan it? Which I think is that's kind of a bad attitude to have personally. And so, in many ways, I kind of looked at what did he do, and I wanted to make sure that I set myself apart differently. So I was
Mm.
told, oh, the Friday PT runs, they're really slow and nobody gets anything. So I was like, fine. Step one, first Friday, we're going to go for a run. And I'm not a great runner.
Uh-huh.
I was the fastest when I was the company commander, but
Yes.
I just was kind of setting a pace, and I felt
Okay.
like we're just going to make this hard, not impossible, and it wasn't just designed to kind of go, you know what, Friday PT is not a joke, it's serious, and I
Mhm.
take it seriously, and so should you. I enforce standards of discipline. I was literally asked that, are you going to enforce discipline? So like curfew rules, we had all kinds of rules in Korea, and so yeah, I became an enforcer because I felt like number one that distinguished me from the last chain of command. And
Yeah.
I feel like standards are important. If we tell you you're not supposed to be out after midnight, because literally we're 12 kilometers from the war zone, from the
There's a
demilitarized
reason.
zone, then it's a pretty serious business.
Yeah.
And so I show up on a Saturday night, one night about 1 o'clock in the morning with a clipboard and my first sergeant and our NCOs, and we start going through the barracks and seeing who's here like they're supposed to and who's not. So yes, we sort of kind of give out some disciplinary actions just to enforce that, hey, there are standards, and when we put out something, we're actually serious about it. I fought really hard to train and then protect the training that we put on the calendar.
Hmm.
That was something that the predecessor had kind of felt like we're just going to kind of go with the flow and do what people tell us.
Mhm.
But as a good company commander, I felt like part of my job is to figure out, well, where do we need to go to be prepared for our wartime mission? Where are we at now? And I need to chart a course. And you know what? If I can't protect the training and I can't get my higher ups, well, that's on them. That's not on me. But I'm not going to let my unit be untrained because I just failed to plan and to fail to try to do my job. And so we did a deep dive kind of on what our wartime mission really was, which was we were supposed to defend this base for the first 5 days. So we literally, like something they'd never done, we put our vehicles out. Where are we going to defend the base from? Where would we put a
Oh,
vehicle?
interesting.
Where's your sector of fire? We actually made the sector sketches, and we made sure everyone knew
Yeah.
exactly where they were supposed to do as well.
Kind of like doing a why behind the what you do and laying the
Exactly.
foundation,
Yep.
kind of
Instead of
a
just
clear vision.
hearing what we're supposed to do, we actually put it into practice.
Yeah.
So that if what we call the balloon going up being like all of a sudden there's an alert that says we're going to war,
Yeah.
we knew exactly where we needed to go. Everyone knew what they were supposed to draw, the equipment, the ammo, etc., and where they're going to have to go without me having to tell them. And I thought that was really important was that everybody understood just where they were supposed to go and what they were supposed to do. So it's muscle memory.
What else happened at Korea?
So yeah,
What
so
part?
there was another milestone that I'm sure you know about, right? So our first daughter, your sister Emily, was born there. She was born down in the hospital there in Yongsan, Korea. So
How did you balance your personal life, like a new daughter, you were newly married, how did you balance that with also leading well and committing time to your career?
so I probably say that I didn't do it well. I feel like work-life balance, it kind of gives you this idea that you can sort of keep everything in equilibrium, and I think that that's almost impossible to do. I
Really?
think you're always kind of seesawing back and forth, and
Huh.
I feel like there are times when you kind of have to double down on your job, and then you're just not going to have as much time for your family. But you got to balance that out. You got to take some
Yeah.
rest. You got to take some leave. I would say that during my time as a company commander, I was way too much on the work side.
Mm.
We took a couple of vacations. We managed to squeeze in a vacation to China, which was really cool. We got to
Oh,
see the Great Wall and the Terracotta Warriors and
wait,
all
this
these
is
really
new?
cool. Well,
I
Emily was
didn't know.
like this tiny little like 3 month old or whatever, so we just drug her around. But it was a great
So
vacation for a full week. Well, I think that was a time that I was able to get a little time off, but. More often than not, I would say during the time I was a company commander, I was probably just too heavy on the work side. And I do feel like in the Army, that's what you see a lot of,
mm,
when you get deployed, especially, it's 100% the Army and very little family time.
mhm.
And I feel like my counter to that would be whenever I was home, I tried to take as never lost leave, always tried to take maximum amount of
Oh,
leave in order to kind of rebalance that and spend time with the family.
awesome. Are there any other lessons, or events that happen in Korea that really have stayed with you, stuck with you still?
Tons of leadership lessons in terms of like really being the leader for 120, 130 man company. You have UCMJ authority, so you have the authority to punish someone if they do
Mm,
something wrong,
mhm.
which means you can give them extra duty, you can take money away from them, there's lots of different ways that you can sort of punish someone, so you have a lot of authority to do that. There's a lot of rules and regulations on how you can exercise that authority. But I felt like one of the things that I really felt like was hammered home was leading from the front, understanding what I needed to do, and then leading that company to where I felt like it needed to go. And that is kind of my personality is I want to lead. I like to lead. I like to be
Mhm.
in the front. And so again, more reps, it gave me lots of opportunities to really lead. And so I really enjoyed that part. I would say that I also learned about being humble because everything you read about in leadership books, they don't always work.
Really?
And I found this in a couple of different times in my career in the Army that you can follow everything. You can be humble, you can apologize, you can do all the right things, and you can still have people that just don't want to follow. So I feel like, kind of understanding that leadership, it's dynamic and it's difficult, but it's also rewarding as well, were all things that I took away from
Yeah,
my time in Korea.
for sure. Awesome. So where did you go next?
Yeah. So after leaving Korea, again, I was kind of starting to feel like, all right, I've kind of done the leadership and
Mhm.
maybe I want to think about what do I want to do next. But I kind of been told that leaving from overseas, leaving the military, transitioning out is kind of difficult. So I had been thinking about possibly, leaving. I'd now been a company commander. I kind of met the goal that I wanted to do, but I didn't want to get out in Korea. So I took my next assignment, turned out to be Travis Air Force Base. The job that I was given was to train Reserve and National Guard units. Part of what I was doing there was, again, kind of reevaluating, do I want to stay in the military or is it time to kind of hang it up and to go do something
Right.
differently? And so one of the things that I kind of did is I sat down with my journal at Travis Air Force Base and I kind of went through what were all the goals that I had. My goals had been get married, so check that box. Be a company commander, so leadership up through the company, so check that box.
Mhm.
And I realized, well, there actually was one thing left that I still wanted to do, and that was to go back and teach at West Point. And I'd applied a couple of times my last year in Korea, my first year at Travis, and I just hadn't gotten accepted. But I had really had a lot of respect for the instructors that were there at West Point, and so I kind of felt like this would be a neat way go back, be in leadership there, be an instructor, and help shape kind of the next generation of leaders. That mentoring, maybe even a little discipleship thing, and because of that, I kept applying to West Point, and at least twice I had applied and gotten rejected, and I was really, I think, kind of really starting to think, I think that I'm kind of done with the Army. I didn't
Right.
really see myself going on
Okay.
much farther. And then actually 9/11 happened, which
Oh.
really changed a lot in terms of my thinking and what I wanted to do next.
Do you remember where you were when 9/11 and, like, what was going through your mind? What were there any, like, emotions that were surprising, or did you just, like, kind of feel shocked, angered?
So I was at Travis Air Force Base. I was, if I remember correctly, we were allowed to do individual PT. I think I had decided just, I'm not going to go to the gym today. I'm just going to sleep. And I think mom came in and said, "Hey, are you tracking what's going on?" And I turned on the TV, and that's when I think we saw one of the towers on fire, and then we saw the second plane hit the tower. And then as they started to come, I started getting falling. I started getting phone calls because I was about the only person from our unit that lived on base. I was told, let's go to the I needed to go to the operations center. I'd be the Army sort of liaison into the Air
Mhm.
Force. And I really didn't do a whole lot that day other than watch the Air Force kind of kick into gear. And they literally grounded like every plane in the United States. And you could track every single plane. I know you weren't there, but people don't remember like that. I'd never seen that before. It's never happened since. Literally nothing was allowed to fly. Planes that were literally halfway across the country to their destination were grounded in the middle of nowhere. Like
Oh,
they
wow.
landed at some random airport, and people were kind of stuck for days trying to figure things out. Kind of what started over the next couple of months was what in my opinion was looked like it was going to be kind of a special forces fight. Our special forces were getting deployed, the 10th
Mhm.
Mountain Division, the 18th Airborne Corps, kind of our light units that were going to go to Afghanistan. So it didn't really feel like we weren't like mobilizing the whole army. It wasn't kind of like everybody's going to go or whatever.
Okay.
Um, and so it didn't really have a huge impact necessarily on my life, at least immediately, and then in the
Okay.
first few months.
Did you see it impact you, though, maybe a little bit later?
So part of this, during this time I was really thinking about whether or not to get out or whether I should stay in. And one of the things that I did see happen was they shut the base down, they locked everybody out. If you didn't have an ID card and a reason to be on base, you weren't allowed on
Oh,
base. And
wow.
so while the soldiers and the airmen that we wanted to minister to and do discipleship with, they still lived on the base. We still had access because we lived on the base.
Mm.
Didn't really affect us, but we did see some other ministries where they were people that were civilians that didn't have access to the base. Their ministries kind of dried up a little bit.
Mm.
They were not able to come onto the base. People were not allowed as freely to
Mm.
leave the base. And so because of that, one of the things I feel like God really spoke to me there was access. The access is important, and being
Mhm.
able to have access to the people that I want to minister, that I want to disciple was really important. Being active duty and being in the military actually gave me tremendous access to the very people that I wanted
Wow.
to disciple.
That's awesome.
And so I really feel like we kind of made the decision. Well, I think that God's not done with this in the Army yet. Let's just kind
Mhm.
of keep going and see what's next. And very soon, maybe a month or two later, I got a letter in the mail from the math department, and said, "Hey, we've got a
At West
slot
Point?
at West Point," and they said, "Hey, we've got a slot for you if you want to come back and be an instructor." And so I felt like, well,
Dang.
this was the last job that I really wanted to have in the Army, and so it
That's
was not a
awesome.
hard decision to make. That let's keep going. It feels like God's going to send us to West Point. I'm going to be an instructor there. Um, Lots of things happened after that. We can kind of get into that in the next podcast. As I'm going to West Point, then Iraq kicks off,
Oh my
and so lots
goodness.
of other things happened.
Yeah.
But this was kind of leading up to that. So after 9/11, I'm kind of got my ticket. I'm on my way to Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm going to be a grad. Because in order to teach as an instructor at West Point, you had to have a master's degree. I
Right.
did not, so therefore part of the package deal was they're going to send you to get a
Uh,
master's degree. So the
uh-huh.
Army paid for me to get a master's in operations research
Sweet.
at Georgia Tech. So that was a good deal. Didn't have to pay for it. And my job for 2 straight years as a captain in the Army was simply to pass all my classes. Lots of fun. So
I'm curious, at the beginning of when you talked about moving to Travis Air Force Base, you said you had looked back in your journal and looked at the goals that you had set for being in the military, and you had realized that there was a goal that you hadn't realized that hadn't become a reality, and that was being an instructor at West Point. Do you think if you hadn't kind of been questioning, like, is this the time to go out? If you hadn't questioned that, gone back to your journals and seen that goal, that you might have like declined the offer to teach at West Point when you got it?
Well, I mean, I feel like the goal of teaching at West Point wasn't something I had forgotten about. I just
Oh.
kind of like there was a bit of a realization that, all the things that I had set up on my list of things I want to get done, I had actually done them. I kind of checked all the blocks except for West Point. I mean, I was still applying
Mhm.
to go teach at West Point. What it was more of just a time of reflection. Something I think that we don't as a society do a lot of is like take time and pause,
Mm.
think deeply about what you're doing, why you're doing things. I think that's something that is so valuable, and I think it's important to do it. But I think that we're so busy these days that we just don't have time to do it. I mean, think about when you have an important decision, it's probably, most people approach it as, well, let me list it to, pros and cons and
Yep.
let's, rack and stack them and let's decide it. How many people do you know that like, you know what? I need to stop. I need to pause. Like the best thing I can do is just pause, pray, and think about things deeply. Like not a lot of people do that. And I feel like that was what I was able to do at Travis Air Force Base, and that deep thinking reminded me a little bit of what I'm getting a sense of purpose out of is not necessarily even the Army at that point. It was like discipling and leading Bible
Mm.
studies, and it was all the things that I was kind of really enjoying doing. And the Army was allowing me to do that, and so I kind of felt like there is still reason for me to be here, even if it's not to go to West Point. I don't exactly remember the timing, but I'm pretty sure I remember making that decision to stay in the Army before we got the letter from West Point, but it may have happened pretty close to it. But, again, we talked before about God's timing and everything, right?
Mhm.
My timing was be a company commander, then go immediately into being an instructor.
Oh.
God's timing was let's wait a few years, maybe think deeply about your career. What do you like about it? And then that was when I was able to get selected to go be an instructor. Now, I'm not saying that if you just wait long enough, God will always give you whatever you want. I mean, there have been other things, as we talked about before, being an astronaut or being a pilot that never really worked out for
Yeah.
me. But I do feel like there is an aspect of, God's timing is not our timing. Sometimes when we don't get what we want, it may not be a no, it might be a wait. It might be a it's not the right time, or
Mhm.
it could be you're not the right person for this job. I mean, sometimes that's hard for us to accept, but I think those are some valuable lessons to learn.
Yeah. To wrap up this episode, you talked about waiting for God's timing and waiting for Him and just resting in Him. Are there any other lessons you learned in this time period?
Yeah, I mean, I think that trusting God is this lesson that I think I have to keep learning over and over again. I guess I'm kind of thick headed, I think that,
I
it's
think
like,
that's true for all of us.
yeah, I mean, we all probably struggle with this to some degree, but sometimes I do feel like the disciples, right? If you read through the New Testament, how many times did Jesus have to say, like, I'm going to the cross, I'm going to,
Okay.
like, before they never even got it when he was alive, like, literally never got it.
Yeah.
They finally understood it at the end. And I feel like to some degree, it's like, just trusting God is like that with me. It's like I
Hmm.
have to learn this over and over again. I mentioned, in previous episode about Joseph and his story
Yeah.
of God taking him through this deliberate process, and that God intended that. Joseph didn't know it, but he needed to go through some processes. Too often, I think I personally, and I think people in general, look at God and we kind of feel like God's holding out on us. Like, God, if you just give me what I want, I'd be happy. And I think over and over again, if you look at the people that are, the richest, the most successful, on and on and on, you always hear these interviews where they're like, I don't know what success is. I
Hmm.
don't know what it'll feel like when I've arrived because I've not felt that no matter how successful they are. And so we sometimes feel like God's holding out what's good for us, or he just wants us to be frustrated. But I really feel like we just have to understand God is such a loving father that
Hmm.
he wants what's best. And what's best is not always just getting what we want, it's the process of getting there. Right. And I think that because he knows where he wants you to go and what he's best suited you for and the best path to get there. It's doesn't make sense to us all the time, but he's not holding back. He's not withholding the best. He's actually just lining it up so that it's perfect, so that it's the best that it possibly can be. And I think if we can learn to take that image of God, that if what I want, I'm not getting it, then maybe it's not the right time. It's
Mm,
not the best for me now. Maybe it's not ever the best thing for me. In which case, then I need to deal with who's got the better goal for Geoff or God, right? Because God has designed us in a way that He knows us better than we know ourselves. God has this way of, He uniquely designed you for a purpose, and He knows what will most fulfill you. And if we can learn to trust that whatever we're going through is what God is intending, not because He's mean or because He wants to frustrate us, but because whatever we're going through is the best thing for us, it's somehow a way that He's going to work it out so that we arrive at the destination He wants us at in the best shape that we can
yeah,
possibly be in. I think it's just something that over and over again we have to learn to trust Him, and that it's hard. It's kind of a daily choice. You know,
yeah,
am I going to trust God? Am I going to trust Geoff? And who's got the better track
yeah.
record? Well, obviously God does, and He's got a perspective I don't
Of
have. So it seems like it would be the obvious choice, but too many times I know that I'm like, yeah, but God, if you would just give me what I really
There's one
want,
thing.
this one thing, I'm sure I would be happy.
Yeah.
And it's
It's
not,
not.
it's not really the way that works.
And it's because, like, as you said, he knit us together and he knows that what's best for us is actually like himself. He might be withholding something because he knows that what you're trying to find in that one thing is actually misplaced and that it should actually be found in him. And kind of, it was interesting. I was thinking, as you mentioned, this repetitive learning process of to trust God. Like faith is built on trust. You can't have faith if you don't have trust.
Yeah, I mean that's so true that faith and trust it's foundational. And I mean I think that if you can figure that out, I think that life isn't perfect. It's not, but it is sweeter. I think it's a little bit
Mm,
more joy filled that if you can learn that when you look at trials and things that are difficult and you look at them through the lens of, I'm not sure what God is doing here, but it's got to be the best because He loves me so much and He wants the best for me. And I just trust that that's what He's
yeah.
doing.
It's like Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for those who are loved by God, who are called according
According to
to
His
his
purpose.
purpose.
Yep. Awesome. God is absolutely able to work out all things.
Yeah.
So that's episode 3. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Love to hear thoughts and comments and even questions that you guys have. All right. See you next time.
See ya.